Good morning and welcome to the 18th meeting of the Public Audit and Post-Legislative Scrutiny Committee in 2019. Can I ask everyone in the public gallery to please make sure your devices are turned to silent or switched off so they don't affect the committee's work this morning. Item 1 is decision on taking business in private. Do members agree to take items 4, 5, 6 in private this morning? Yeah. Thank you. Item 2 is the Section 23 report, Social Security, implementing the devolved powers. I'd like to welcome our witnesses to the meeting this morning. Leslie Fraser, Interim Director General for Organisational Development and Operations. Stephen Kerr, Social Security Director. Alison Byrne, Social Security Deputy Programme Director. Kevin Stevens, Head of Strategic and Programme Finance, and Andy McClintock, Chief Digital Officer, all from the Scottish Government, and also David Wallace, Chief Executive of Social Security Scotland. I'd like to invite Leslie Fraser to make an opening statement to the committee.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm very pleased to be here to give evidence in my new role. Although I've recently taken up post, I am a long-standing member of the Social Security Programme Board in my previous role as Director for Housing and Social Justice in the Government. So I've seen first-hand the substantial progress which the Government has made in devolving social security powers safely and securely. From the start of the programme in 2016, the Government has now fully devolved discretionary housing payments and introduced 5 new payments. Carers Allowance Supplement, 3 Best Start grants and Best Start foods, and a 6th funeral support payment will be introduced later this month. The new agency, which has just celebrated its first birthday, has now provided financial support to over 91,000 people and has received excellent feedback. The latest figures show 97% of online clients rated the application service good or very good, and the telephone application services receiving even better feedback than that. I know that this team are very proud of these achievements and pleased that Audit Scotland also recognise that we've done well so far. But neither I nor they are complacent about what lies ahead. I come into this post at a time when, as Audit Scotland emphasises, much remains to do. Next year we move into the delivery of complex disability benefits and the Scottish Child Payment as well, and that is working to a demanding timetable. Inevitably, with more complex benefits come different and harder challenges. I'm very grateful for the work that Audit Scotland have done in supporting and reporting on the Social Security Programme of Devolution, which is one of the largest programmes of new powers coming in the last 2 decades. Our programme of work, as you would expect, continually learns from experience. And as the Auditor General has told the committee, the programme's staff are self-aware. They know what needs to be done, and they couldn't really work faster or more conscientiously in doing that. Audit Scotland's recommendations, which we accept, sit very well with the direction of travel of the programme, and they help reinforce activity which is already underway or which we have planned. They have indicated areas which we can strengthen, and that's very useful, and work is already underway to do that. 6 months on from when Audit Scotland completed their evidence gathering, we've made, I think, significant progress, which I look forward to discussing with the committee. In meeting the challenges that the next phase of delivery will bring, risk management, I think, will be absolutely crucial. And I was glad to see that the report agrees with previous Audit Scotland recommendations that there's some good quality processes in place to do that. And that's an area that I will be particularly focusing on, and an area where I hope to add significant value. So I'm very grateful to the committee for your interest, and my colleagues and I are very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much indeed for your opening statement, Ms Fraser. Can I kick off by saying you're all very, very welcome here this morning, but it's very unusual for us to have so many witnesses on one report, and I understand that you were keen to have all 6 personnel here this morning. But can you maybe give us a quick brief outline of what everyone does and how that fits together in terms of your management structure?
Of course. So Stephen Kerr is the Programme Director sitting within the Scottish Government, responsible for the overall programme of the devolution of the powers and the successful implementation of that. And he is supported in that by Alison Byrne, who is the Deputy Programme Director. David Wallace then picks up at the agency, and David is the Chief Executive at the agency. So that's responsible for the frontline management and delivery of the benefits to people. Andy McClintock is the Chief Technology Advisor as Chief Digital Officer, and he works for both the programme and the agency on technology. And Kevin Stevens is our Head of Strategic Finance within the programme, so responsible for pulling together the short, medium and long-term financial plans of the programme.
Excuse me, the programme being different from the agency? In
correct, yes.
In what the programme is the Scottish Government's management of this?
That's right. The programme is the Scottish Government's implementation of the devolution of the powers.
Yes.
And as we implement them, so we hand over to the agency to run that as a frontline public service in Scotland.
Thank you. We just want to be clear for the public
Indeed.
watching. Stephen Kerr.
Yeah, Convener, just to be clear, I'm the Director in the Scottish Government. So the Scottish Government has a number of directors who have responsibilities, and I'm the Director for Social Security. It was my decision to set up a programme to deliver the social security powers. That programme is run by a woman called Lisa Barron-Broadhurst, who's my programme director, and her deputy is here today, Alison Byrne.
Okay. So we've got plenty of people to make sure this all goes right.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Yes. I'm going to ask Colin Beattie to lead our questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I'd like to look at some of the long-term planning here, particularly around costs. In the Auditor General's report, she was talking about the initial cost of 308 million, which clearly at that stage had to be a ballpark figure. But obviously decisions are being taken along the way which commit funding, and you would hope that that was getting rather more honed down. And it's concerned there's been very limited evidence of estimating and reporting on long-term implementation costs. Now, there's a letter from the Cabinet Secretary indicating that new finance team had been put in place. Is that development going to address some of the concerns that the report raises in relation to long-term cost estimates? And if so, how?
Yes, there's been considerable work on 3 aspects of the work of the programme in preparation for Wave 2, and finance is one of those. So there's been a review of the finances of the programme, and that has been undertaken not just by the programme itself, but has brought in peers from within the Scottish Government, and that work is now complete. That has resulted in us augmenting senior financial capability both within the programme itself. So Kevin Stevens is the head of the strategic finance within the programme. Yes.
Clarify on that particular point about the finance team that the Cabinet Secretary is referring to. Was that a one-off intervention which has now moved on, having passed on whatever skills that are required, or how did that work?
No, it's been part of the planned evolution of the programme. So the programme is built from the Wave 1 benefits, which by and large have been more straightforward and simpler, although still quite complex. And we've also built the infrastructure and the agency and all the processes through Wave 1. As we move to Wave 2, where the benefits are more complex and the sums are much larger, so we need to evolve and develop aspects of the programme to to meet those new requirements. Finance is one of those areas where we've had to do that work, and that work is now reaching a conclusion, including the full assessment of the impact, for example, of the Scottish Child payment as well. So we've both augmented our capability in the programme team within the Scottish Government and also within the agency, recognising that the agency itself is now delivering benefits to the people of Scotland and needs its own capability and capacity in this area.
You actually touched on a point I was going to be raising about the £10 benefit, because obviously the implementation time for that is quite short.
Yes.
Now, presumably the Social Security will be responsible for implementing and delivering that. Now, it's a tight time schedule. Presumably it will bump some of the other long-term planning you've got further into the future. Do you have an estimate of how much delay there's going to be on other aspects of implementing Social Security because of that, and what the likely additional costs will be?
The safe and secure delivery of the benefits has been the absolute watchword for the programme overall. And as the Cabinet Secretary for Communities and Local Government announced in June, the decision to bring forward Scottish Child Payment has meant that we need to make room within the programme. So there are going to be delays to attendance allowance, we expect, to Scottish Carers allowance, and to the completion of case transfer as well. The work on reprogramming the finance, the work programme, and the planning and governance round about that is now concluding, and that is all being fed into a revised programme business case.
So has the long-term financial planning for this actually taken into account this new payment now?
It has. That is the work that is being completed just now.
Do we have a ballpark on the cost of that?
I can't give you a ballpark on the cost of that just now. But that work is being finalised and checked for discussion with ministers, and I understand that the Cabinet Secretary plans to bring that to Parliament in the course of this autumn.
So autumn is the date at which you
I understand that's correct. Am I right, Stephen?
Yeah. Work to refresh the programme business case is ongoing, and the intention would be to make that available at the time that the Scottish budget is published later this year.
How significant will the delay be on the other parts of the implementation? Are we talking a year? Are we talking about 2 years?
We're going through, I'll bring Alison in a moment, talk about the feasibility work that goes on when you slot something like this into a large programme of activity. The initial analysis that the Cabinet Secretary shared in June was that disability assistance for older people would move into 2021 rather than 2020. The winter of 2020, and that Scottish Carers Allowance would be introduced in early 2022 rather than late 2021, and that's the process we're still working through at the moment to understand if those dates that the Cabinet Secretary shared are the dates that we can hold to, whether we can bring anything forward or whether anything will take a bit of a longer period of time than we anticipated when the Cabinet Secretary made her statement to Parliament in June. Alison, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add?
I think that's right, as both Leslie and Stephen has said. We made some assumptions in the statement in June when we set out what, because of the agile way that we work, what that would mean if we take safe and secure as the way that we build and develop our benefits, what the implications of the Scottish Child Payment might be for the rest of the programme and its delivery. And Stephen's just set out the assumptions that the Cabinet Secretary announced back in June around attendance allowance, carers allowance and case transfer. Over the summer, we've been taking forward quite detailed feasibility work to look at properly getting beneath the impacts of the Scottish Child Payment, and the Cabinet Secretary intends to come back to Parliament and update them on those findings. But that's been looking at, for example, we obviously have a key dependency on the UK Government in the form of DWP to be able to deliver to the timetable that ministers have set out. We've been looking at the infrastructure and systems that we would need to do that, building on what we already have in place in relation to Best Start Grant. We've also been working closely with David and colleagues at the agency around some of the staffing implications on his side.
Just one last question is, obviously it's important that Parliament be kept informed as to progress on this. You've already indicated that the Cabinet Secretary will be making a statement in autumn. We're almost there. What about on an ongoing basis? How are you going to report back to Parliament on an ongoing basis?
Well, this will form an important element of the Scottish Government's budget setting. So I would expect that social security would be seen clearly within the usual reporting of that. And over and above that, the work that we have been doing to prepare for phase wave 2 is feeding into a refreshed programme business case, which will bring together the planning, the workforce assumptions, the finances, and we are working towards making that available around the time of the Scottish budget. So I hope that that would give Parliament considerable information and assurance about the plans that are underway.
I guess my concern is this is a major project, and the success of it is extremely important.
Absolutely.
And my concern is to make sure that Parliament are kept aware as the milestones are achieved, you know, going over the coming years.
Yes. We do publish considerable amount of information about the impact of the work that we're doing, and David might want just to say a bit about the information that's regularly available from the agency on that.
Yeah, from an agency perspective, and just to kind of clarify the point at the start of this as well, so I am responsible for the agency, and my shorthand for describing that would say we look after live services. So once things come from the programme and are live services to client, they become essentially a more business as usual operation. That involves me, as people have said, working really, really closely with ourselves as a team, which is why we have a large audience today. So once we get into that kind of cycle of business as usual in terms of benefit expenditure, we will be into our normal reporting as an executive agency of the expenditure that's going through the agency's books. And we're already working with Audit Scotland on our first set of partial year accounts, which we're finalising at the moment, and that would be what we would report back for the agency's financial expenditure, of which I'm accountable officer for.
A couple of points of clarification on the timing of benefits from both Stephen Kerr and Alison Byrne. Alison, I think you said that you're working on the child poverty payment, if I picked you up correctly, following Aileen Campbell's statement to the Chamber in June. Did I pick up from what you said that there might be a possible delay to that once you work out the sort of potential timescale of implementation?
No, what I was referring to was the impact on the rest of the social security programme. As Ms Campbell outlined in her statement, it is likely that, for example, as Stephen said, attendance allowance, carers allowance and the date for finalising case transfer, those dates are likely to change.
So the child poverty payment will be, as far as you anticipate now, will be delivered to the timescale that Aileen Campbell set out?
Yes, that's our working assumption, and at this point in time, that's what all of the feasibility and impacting assessment has been looking at. Yes. Okay,
thank you.
The Programme for Government statement said that the first payments will be made by Christmas 2020, and that's the timetable we're working to.
And you're confident that timescale you can hold to?
That's what we're working to, yes.
And on the carers allowance, you said, Stephen Kerr, that the timescale has slipped, which is it likely to slip even further? Or?
So when Aileen Campbell made her statement, she said it would move from the end of 2021 to the beginning of 2022. And again, that's the position we're holding to at the moment until the feasibility work has been done, until the assumptions have been tested. And if there's any update to that, of course, the Cabinet Secretary will come back and inform Parliament.
Okay, thank you. Alex Neil.
For that, can I just seek a wee bit more clarification? Because obviously it was only a couple of days ago the FM announced that the child payment is being brought forward to 2020, Christmas 2020, which is very welcome. And Alison has said that there has been that the introduction of this new benefit will result in the delay for the attendance allowance, I think the carers allowance and transfer of cases. Can I just be sure that, and I think you suggested a delay of a year in each case, can I just suggest that those delays would, because it's now earlier than originally planned, that those delays won't be longer than the time frame you outlined? In other words, until 2 days ago, the child payment was going to be paid in 2021, it was my understanding. So the delays that you mentioned and the other benefits as a result of doing that, are those delays going to be adversely affected because the government has decided, rightly in my view, to bring forward the implementation date for the child payment?
So at the moment, there is no change to the assumptions set out by Ms Campbell in her June statement in relation to the impacts on the remainder of the Wave 2 benefits. So that is the move of attendance allowance into summer 2021, the slight delay to carers allowance from the end of 2021 to the beginning of 2022, and the slight increase in the length of time to complete case transfer from the end of 2024 into 2025.
Okay. I think what would be helpful for the committee, Leslie, probably for the Parliament as a whole, would be just to get in one table a programme summary overview with each benefit, you know, the ones that have been implemented, the ones that are due to be implemented, when they're going to be implemented, you know, just a summary so that you can very quickly see where the programme's at. The programme plan, is that over a 5-year period, a 3-year period? What period does it cover?
I think that will be a 5-year plan for the programme, but I've not.
So Alison might want to come in and talk about programme planning, but it will be for the lifetime of the programme. So when we started off the programme, we didn't have things like the Scottish Child Payment in our minds. Of course, we now do. We've had a discussion about changes to the programme within that. So because that comes into the programme and has an impact on some of the other deliverables, the programme plan will therefore be extended to cover the lifetime of the devolution activity that we're working on, and as Alison's outlined, that'll take us into 2025.
Okay. So when you give us a summary, and I know it's a, you know, there needs to be flexibility in this, could you give us it up till 2025 so we can get the overall picture, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, if that information isn't already publicly available, we can make sure that's provided.
If you could send it to the committee after this meeting, that would be superb.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great, thank
Alex
you.
Neil.
Can I just ask a more strategic question in terms of, I mean, one of the key issues from day one, and I think, you know, I think this is an area where the government has done extremely well in getting the whole social security infrastructure up and running so efficiently and so quickly. But one of the problems has been from day one, certainly when I was involved as a minister, was the problems with the DWP, particularly their IT systems, which on their own admission were very antiquated. They didn't speak to each other with all the different programmes. When I say IT system, we're talking about a multitude of IT systems. So looking forward, presumably now we are building an IT system and indeed a capacity that eventually will be totally independent of the DWP and won't rely on their system for our bit of social security. So my general question is, not just in terms of IT, in terms of workforce, in terms of finance, do we now have the capacity to take on, if there was an agreement, say, between the UK and Scottish Government next year to take on additional social security and transfer additional social security responsibilities, do we have the capacity to do that?
There's quite a lot in that question. And of course, under the current planned devolution of powers, we will run, I think, around 14 or 15% of the totality of benefits within Scotland. So we will be reaching and touching many, many Scottish people through the devolved benefits under this programme of work. But those same people will still rely on the UK government for other benefits and pensions and so on. So the importance of the systems being able to work together so that users and clients have a joined up and seamless experience will remain absolutely critical. And that's at the heart of the working relationship that we have with our colleagues in DWP. We are building systems and infrastructure that will both be flexible and capable of responding to changes in the future. And I'll maybe come to Andy to talk a bit about how we're doing that in the world of IT, for example.
Yes, I think it's important to recognise that for as long as there are two governments in this country with shared responsibility for benefits. There will always be a relationship with DWP in terms of how we exchange information about clients, so that clients experience a single joined up benefits situation. The technology that we are building has always been set from the outset to be scalable and take on more benefits should they come to the Scottish Government. Our work today over the last 2 years has been very progressive. We've built technology that is scalable and it's a multi-benefit platform, whereas DWP, from their decades of operation, have multiple systems for multiple benefits. We've tried to take a different approach, much more scalable approach, technology that sits in the cloud, which I'm happy to talk about for hours if you've got time.
Oh, thanks.
I didn't think so. But basically, we have set out on a journey to build technology that's set for now and has got the capacity to expand in the future. Obviously, the time and resource constraints goes with that, but it's important to know that we can't do this on our own. When I sat here 23 months ago, I set out the importance of working with DWP. We have a good relationship with DWP, and they are as essential as part of our journey. We have a good relationship, good exchange of information, and it's in both of our interests that we share information carefully so that the citizens and the clients get the best possible experience.
Well, my kind of final question is something completely different. Child poverty is obviously a major challenge for all of us, and I very much welcome the introduction of the child payment. I think it's something that's absolutely essential. And as the First Minister has indicated, that should take 30,000 children out of poverty. Two questions. That 30,000 figure, what rate of take-up does that assume? And secondly, does that mean the overall figure will come down by 30%, by 30,000? Or is it 30,000 children coming out of child poverty, but with the continuing increase in child poverty as a result of universal credit and all the other things, does that mean that the actual level of child poverty might still continue to rise? So that 30,000, if you could define it a bit more, Leslie, please.
Yes. As you say, Mr. Neil, we're anticipating a 3% reduction in the percentage points of children in poverty in Scotland as a result of this. And I think we are anticipating around an 80% take-up of the benefit. And I think that modelling work was provided to the Parliament at the time that the payment was announced. But we can make sure that information is available. You're quite right also to highlight the challenge of, as it were, absolute poverty and relative poverty. And there could well be significant headwinds that increase rates of child poverty, which the benefits will certainly help to alleviate, but will not necessarily tackle absolutely. So it will be an issue that we will need to, and ministers will want to review and discuss with the Parliament when we see the impact of the Scottish Child Payment when it's rolled out.
Okay. And in terms of child poverty, I mean, obviously there are other things we could be doing to tackle child poverty. So is there an ongoing analysis of what additional measures could be taken? I mean, obviously childcare facilities are a contributing factor to reducing the levels of child poverty because of the knock-on impact on the ability to increase earned income for the family. So is there an ongoing analysis to look at other ways in which we can help reduce child poverty?
Yes, there's an action plan on to tackle child poverty, which was published, which again has significant analytical work underpinning that, and that looks at the key drivers of child poverty, including the income coming to people through work, the income coming through benefits, as well. So there are different aspects to tackling child poverty.
I've seen that. I suppose my question is, are we likely to see additional policy initiatives resulting from that analysis?
That would be a matter, I think, for ministers and the Parliament to discuss, but there's certainly, as you know, statutory targets, and ministers are very clear that they want those met. And so they are continuing to rightly look to all parts of government to deliver on work to tackle child poverty, and that includes in fair work, in early years and education, as well as in social security, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Willie Coffey.
Thanks very much, Convener, and good morning. Colin Beattie, I think, mentioned the overall programme cost at about £300 million, I think he mentioned. And from memory, I recall the IT cost component of this is about 200 million, so it's pretty substantial. I wonder if I could drill in a little and ask for some kind of assurance, I suppose, about the various software components that are delivering this entire system. Are they on track? Are they on time? Are they on budget? Could you give us a perspective on that, please, at the moment?
Andy?
Yeah, so the figure that you're referring to is under the £308 million block figure was an outline estimate of £190 million for technology. We are still working well inside that £190 million financial envelope. All the systems that we're currently building are on track. All the technology that we're deploying and using is on track. We have a plethora of systems and technologies that are underpinning the whole programme and indeed the agency. My job is to make sure that the technology supports both of them. And at this stage, everything from all the suppliers and all the suppliers that we're appointing is on track to deliver. When I sat here 23 months ago, we'd only just awarded one contract. You may well remember the conversation we had at the time. Since that time, we've moved on. We have now several major suppliers in the programme, as we predicted. We always set out on the journey to have a multi-supplier environment. That's what we're doing, from the core technology to do the case management, through to the digital portal, through to the cloud infrastructure, and all the stuff that we use to underpin those systems, and indeed all the infrastructure that we now have in 2 significant agency buildings in Glasgow and Dundee. So at the moment, everything is on track.
Glad to hear that. Where there are any dependencies with the DWP on delivering software components of this, have we got agreement from them to deliver anything we need in order to keep us on track?
As I said in my last response, the relationship we have with DWP is very good. We have a multi-level relationship with DWP at my level, above my level and below my level, at programme, at technology levels. We have good agreements around the information that we need from them and what they need from us. As we go into design our systems where we make assumptions on the information we're going to get from DWP, we share it with them, we work with them. We have regular contacts and work groups with DWP, both in Scotland and in England, to make sure that our assumptions and their assumptions align. And today, everything we've expected from them, we've got. Technology-wise, where we expected to send information to them, for example, payments, that's worked perfectly well from day one. And as Leslie's mentioned earlier on, the number of payments we've made to the number of citizens in Scotland is increasing. Everybody's been paid on time, every time, which has been the most important part of this journey so far.
Of course, the next phase, as Leslie pointed out, is probably the most challenging of all. And in terms of systems development for that, Andy, are we repurposing the software systems to deliver that, or are we writing new software from scratch, and who's doing what?
Okay, so when I was here 23 months ago, we just awarded a contract for a case management system, which at the time was targeted at low-income benefits. Those benefits have been delivered, and what we're doing for Wave 2 is to expand the use of that very same system to cope with multiple benefits. As I said earlier on, we're building a multi-benefits platform, and the plan is to continue to expand the use of that single system to pay multiple benefits, whereas DWP have come from a situation where they have predominantly a benefit platform per benefit. So what we've done so far is build a foundation, and we're looking to extend the use of that. When I was here previously, we talked about making sure that we bought a product that was scalable, that could be highly reused. That's what we bought. The software license that we bought at the time are used throughout the life of the programme and into the agency. So we're looking to maximise the use of that technology. We're not looking to customise it, we're looking to configure it and keep it as a mainstream product, so as the future enhancements and releases are passed to us, we can take those as an upgrade.
And how do you test these systems without doing it live? How do you test that it's working?
Okay, well, given that the committee doesn't want me to sit here for 2 hours and talk about the cloud environments, we have multiple environments. So we have development environments, we have testing environments, and we go through a number of releases before anything goes into the live environment. So as we develop more functionality, we do it in isolation in a number of environments, and each time we test that, we move it to a next stage of the environment, and ultimately it goes into what's called a final release, and it goes live and it integrates with what's already been delivered previously.
So when it goes live, it's working?
Indeed.
Okay. Last question, Convener.
We all have stories from constituents in the past who, when trying to access benefits in the past, were confronted with endless IT hurdles, and that might have been access to IT at home or access to software, and their inability to get past those barriers. How are we solving that particular problem, and can people still access these benefits without being required to go online?
So, again, when I was here previously, I talked about the need for us to build a multi-channel platform, because we should never assume that the citizens of Scotland would be forced into a digital channel. We should encourage the updates of digital technology where it's appropriate for the citizens, but there will always be an alternative method, traditionally by telephone. So we have a telephone channel, we have a post channel for those people sending information on paper, but ultimately our desire to see more people have a digital experience and digital interaction. The systems we are building have been built with the citizens through user experience panels, lots of work on user research, user engagement, so that when you do expose a digital channel, it's built on what the experience of what the citizens are expecting to see, terminology, wording and phrasing that means something to the citizens rather than being information that is confusing. So a multi-channel platform gives the citizens the options as to which route and which method do they want to engage with the agency.
David, did you want to?
Just if it's okay, just to add to that as well. So we are also, in terms of the agency, building a local delivery capability as well. So once we are fully operational, we will have both our Dundee headquarters and a big base in Glasgow, but equally we will have people scattered across all your constituencies in Scotland as well. And that's because from the very early stages of here, we've been absolutely key that face-to-face delivery is a really important aspect of making sure that people get exactly what you're describing, that access to service. That wasn't something we brought on for the Wave 1 benefits because it wasn't felt that that was required to negotiate these benefits. And I think that's proven correct from the data. So around about 90% of our clients have been able to go straight to digital, and digital as a preference. And the telephony service has worked in the background to support them. And I think, as Leslie said in the opening statement, the feedback to the digital channel has been phenomenally positive, and that's testament to the work that's gone in right up front in terms of putting the user at the heart of that experience. But equally, when people then do call the agency to get that more direct personal support, again, the feedback from that has been incredibly positive. And just in terms of an overall infrastructure, it's probably just worth emphasising as well, people access the benefits through the MyGov portal. So again, this has been something that CDO team and the programme have worked really closely with our digital directorate colleagues to ensure this is built into the wider Scottish Government strategy as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning. I'd like to take you back to the Convener's opening, where she asked about governance. Now, the report is broadly positive about the governance and the organisational arrangements, but it does suggest that the pace of decision-making to support the delivery timelines has challenged the governance at times, and that has led to certain decisions being taken out with the appropriate processes or the formal governance arrangements in place. And one of the things I raised the last time was that this committee often sees negative results when that starts happening. Now, we heard last time that there's a review taking place into this and the governance arrangements more generally. So I'd like to ask, where are you on that, and what steps are being taken to ensure that governance arrangements are appropriate for the pace of delivery?
The review of governance has been part of the review of the planning, the finances, and the workforce requirements. As we move from the relatively more straightforward work of Wave 1 into the more complex work of Wave 2, it's absolutely critical that we've got proper decision making, proper governance, proper risk management arrangements in place. We've continuous learning and improvement is at the core of the way that the Agile process works in the programme. And in order to ensure that we're prioritising the right lessons from all that we are learning, not just from this programme, but as we look across other programmes in public services, we've now formalised a continuous improvement programme and team that's helping all the aspects of the programme with that continuous improvement. We're augmenting the resources and the skills within the programme board, for example, and we're ensuring that all of the subsequent layers of governance are appropriate and able to make decisions in a proper, robust way, but in the time scales that are required in what can be a quite fast-moving environment. I'll perhaps ask Stephen just to say a little bit more about the governance arrangements we have.
Just picking up Mr Kerr's point about the speed of decision making. Our friends and colleagues in Audit Scotland know we take a slightly different view as to the example that they provided in the report, where our delivery board within the overall programme infrastructure looked at a matter on I think at least 2 occasions, maybe 3 occasions, and couldn't come to a view. Now that came to me as SRO to make a decision. I would view that actually as working within the governance arrangements, not out with the governance arrangements. If it had been a significant decision, I wouldn't have taken it as SRO, I would have moved it into our programme board, and that would have considered the matter. But because it was in relation to an ITT to advertise a contract, I was quite happy as SRO to make that decision, knowing that the full decision on the award of the contract would come back to the programme board. So I think in terms of what Audit Scotland have used to illustrate that point, I wouldn't necessarily agree with them that that's the best example, but I do accept the point about the speed of decision making within the programme, and that's something that we're going to be focusing on through the review to make sure decisions are made at the right levels of the programme as we move into Wave 2 and to deliver the Scottish Child Payment.
Can you, a small extra question, can you give me a timeline on that review? When that will report, but more substantive point, there's quite a big list of things that are being reviewed, and in the previous session of this committee with Audit Scotland I asked about this, and Audit Scotland told me one of our concerns is about the range of activities that the government is undertaking on governance and how it is organised. There's a big list of things to be done, but we think that too much is being done. It will be really hard to do all of that alongside Wave 1 and Wave 2. So along with the timeline, what comment do you make on that?
I mean, Audit Scotland are quite right that this is a really pivotal moment for the programme, and that's why this work has been underway over the last 6 months and is concluding now with the full investigation of the impact of the Scottish Child Payment, so that we can bring the governance, the planning, the resourcing and the finance work together, and that is all feeding into the refreshed programme business case, which we will be taking to ministers over the next few weeks, and which we anticipate will be made public around about the time of the Scottish budget, so that Parliament will be able to look at that alongside the financial and other plans of the government. So it's absolutely critical that we get this right, and we do the learning from Wave 1 and from other programmes and activities out with the programme, and that's why we've made this investment in the continuous improvement programme and the team to support that, because they have a critical role in helping us do exactly as you described, prioritise what's going to be most useful and most critical as we move from Wave 1 to Wave 2.
Done.
David Wallace, I was delighted that our campaign to base the headquarters and the Benefits Agency in Dundee was met by the Scottish Government, and I take it you are based in Dundee and running your operation from there at the moment in Dundee House, is that right?
I personally split my time between Glasgow and Dundee, and frequently Edinburgh as well, for the purposes of integrating with policy elsewhere. So I'm personally slightly nomadic, but we were really keen when we launched our first benefits that as Dundee as a headquarters, that's where we should launch our first benefits from. In terms of where we are in terms of staffing, Dundee is now our most significant centre of operations, so we have more people based in Dundee than we do have in Glasgow. And that's been building up essentially from a zero base in terms of the Scottish Government in Dundee. So we've had a small footprint of Scottish Government civil servants, but we've had to build that essentially from a standing start. So again, we were phenomenally proud to be able to do that in Dundee, And, you know, as you probably appreciate, the work with the local authority in that area has allowed us to be able to do that at quite rapid pace as well. And again, some members, I think, have been to see the operations in Dundee, which we're really keen to ensure that it has that sort of open transparency around about the operations. So, yes, I kind of share your delight that, that we're there.
And you have 250 staff in the Dundee operation at the moment, is that right?
I think that's probably the figure that's in the public domain in terms of an end of March figure, yes. But I mean,
So is that correct?
It's correct, yeah, at the time of going out. The agency continues to grow almost on a daily basis.
And the plan is to have 750 people working for the Scottish Benefits Agency in the city of Dundee, is that right?
Yes.
Yes. I understand that at the moment you're in Dundee House, which is the local authority's headquarters in Lindsay Street, and there's an 18-month lease on the accommodation you're using from the council. When does that 18-month lease come to an end?
I don't have that date in front of me just now, but the relationship is one where we're working with them on a daily basis to ensure whether we could roll that forward if need be as well. We're working on a more permanent solution in Dundee. Those sort of discussions are at a fairly advanced stage, but at the moment are commercially restricted, so I wouldn't want to put any more than that in the public domain at the moment. Okay. But we are working really closely with both the Council and Scottish Government's property colleagues to ensure that we've got a more permanent site in Dundee. So
is your preference to have your own building, as it were, for your 750 staff within the city, and for that to be secured at the end of this 18 months?
That would be our preference, yes. For the reason of culture, we're really keen to try and keep all of the people within Dundee within the same building. As members know, a really important aspect of this isn't just delivering the benefits, important as that is, but the way that we do that and the culture behind how we do that. So it is our belief that doing that within a single site would be beneficial. You will know the Dundee property market probably better than I do, and it is relatively restricted in terms of the scale of commercial buildings in Dundee. But that would be our preference. Okay. And I think it's also worth saying on that as well, we also have a preference around about having a building which feels connected to communities as well. So we were really clear we are going to be a new public service. We don't want simply a building where we can lock people away and don't see the clients that they serve. So again, we are really keen to ensure that those buildings are accessible, they feel part of a community, they feel part of the city. So do you mean by that a city centre location rather than a more outlying location? Is that what I interpret you mean? That would be our ideal, where people move around about the city, you know, leave our building to engage with the city, you know, use the facilities, use local businesses as part of that, you know, have good transport links for public transport, environmental purposes as well. My interpretation of the commercial property and office accommodation is different from yours. There's plentiful office accommodation that is empty in the city at the moment, so I'm sure the Scottish Benefits Agency will be able to get a lease, you know, quite swiftly. So I wish you all the best with that, and delighted that these 750 jobs are going to be in the city. So I wish you all the best with that. But I know that Anas Sarwar has some questions on the recruitment process around the remaining staff.
Thanks, Chair. And if you can't find a building in Dundee, we're happy to look for one in Glasgow.
Mr. Sarwar.
Yeah, I, of course, I'm saying that as a joke. I don't want to incur the wrath of the Chair.
And Deirdre.
I want to just pick up on the workforce challenges, because we've heard consistently around all different parts of the public sector around workforce challenges. So there's clearly workforce challenges around the social security sector as well. But before I do that, can I just get a clarification around the number of staff around the programme side, because it was outlined at the start, around the programme side of the social security system, and then Social Security Scotland itself. So what are the workforce challenges in both parts?
Very good. I think within the programme, the resourcing is being well managed, and we're looking at the specific skills that we require. We've, again, augmented our skills and capability in terms of finding the appropriate skills that we need with a new workforce planning group. and a dedicated programme resourcing team. And Stephen would be able to say more about that. And I know that the agency has got ambitious plans for the recruitment, not least around the Scottish Child Payment, and David would be able to say more about that. Stephen, do you want to cover the programme?
Yeah, I'll bring Alison in as well, just to touch on the activity that's underway just now. But across the programme, as you'll have heard from Andy, there's a digital component, so there's a huge push to either recruit people from the public and private sector in Scotland, sometimes from the rest of the UK, to come and work in the programme. It's a really attractive place for people to come to work in the Scottish Government, both in terms of the challenge that we offer people and the environment we ask them to work in. So we're doing quite well in terms of putting an offer on the table that people think is comparative to other opportunities they might have. And he's done a lot of work in terms of growing the base of skills within the organisation on digital, and he can talk a bit more about that. Again, we've done a huge amount of activity in the government to increase our capability around programme planning, risk assurance, our finance capability as well. These are skills that are not plentiful, but again, we have been working very closely with our colleagues in People Directorate, using recruitment processes that attract people into the organisation, and we've found so far that we've got the right blend and mix of both permanent members of staff and civil servants that will be in the programme and in the Directorate for this period of time, and then can be take their careers further within the Scottish Government, and temporary resource, which is a much needed aspect of the overall resourcing piece. We don't want to stuff the Scottish Government with people that have only a specific skill set we need for a moment in time, and have trouble then offering these people opportunities in the future. So that's how it looks broadly from the Directorate and the programme point of view. I don't know if, David, you want to say something about the method of recruitment in the agency, and Andy might want to develop some of the stuff in digital as well.
So from an agency perspective, at the moment we're predominantly pulling in more generalist skills that we need and to service clients is the main sort of growth activity that we've had. As I think the Audit Scotland report points out, we've actually found quite a good market for those skills. Again, back to my previous point, we're really keen to ensure that the way we recruit people in is really important for us, so that we kind of reach out, particularly people who are potentially further from the employment market. Our jobs are suitable as long as people have the right attributes, the right attitude. We can pull people in and skill them up to do the job that we need them to do. So we've been working really closely in both Dundee and Glasgow with employment services, making sure that the workforce that we have tries to represent Scotland as well. So we've been really focused on both protected characteristics and other social economic sort of background to try and get a blend of skills into the organisation. So our recruitment has been very much focused on how we go around about doing that and making the recruitment feel open to do it. Andy will say a bit more about the sort of the digital and CDO type of skills. But again, I think the point that was made by Leslie at the start, Andy currently services both the agency and the programme, so straddles both. So again, Andy is recruiting on the basis that some of those that he is recruiting may be a permanent resource that over time will migrate across to the agency as well.
Okay, so picking up on the digital footprint, when I was before committee 23 months ago, I had a head count of 15 people in post. As of today, I have 141 people in post. 67 of those people are permanent staff. The digital skills shortage in the UK is no secret. It's amplified in Scotland, and it's polarised in both Glasgow and Edinburgh. We've done a great deal of effort and put a lot of work in the last 23 months to bring a lot of new people into the organisation, both from across the UK government, the Scottish public sector, and indeed the private sector. So I now have people in my division from financial services, from travel, from the retail industry, and various segments. We bring a cross-fertilisation of people, good skills, a rich field of talent into the division. And as David has said, my job is to build a capability, but not just for now for the programme, but for the future in the agency. My division will eventually move into the agency and become the digital division for the agency. So whilst I'll never always fill my entire headcount with permanent staff, we'll always have a very small contingent workforce towards the end. We are building a good mix of people from a range of backgrounds, and from where we were 23 months ago, to go from 15 people to 141 people in post. It's quite significant. We've run nearly 40 separate recruitment campaigns in 23 months. So every single post in my division, we can evidence that we've gone out to the market, looking for that talent across the UK, in Scotland, using a variety of channels.
So the Auditor General's report says that the programme is assessing needs expected core workforce of 345 and runs routinely with 30% of those posts unfilled. Does that include the 149, or is that 149 separate to that 345?
I'll let Alison come in and speak on the programme headcount in a moment, but in terms of my own headcount, so because I have a digital division that supports both the programme and agency, those figures I've given you are just for the digital division and evidence how far we've come in 23 months trying to build a sustainable digital command in Scotland.
So what will be helpful will be total number of programme and unfilled posts, and then probably a similar figure for the actual Social Security Scotland part.
So in the programme we currently have approximately 350 staff working to design and build the services that David and team go on to deliver. The figure...
That doesn't include the 149, the 149's on top of that 345, or is the 149 included in the 345?
141.
141, sorry, apologies. Is that so? Is it 345 and the 141, or the 141 included in the 345?
So the approximately 350 we have at the moment is just the programme figure. Andy's resources are over and above that.
Right, okay.
The figure quoted in the Audit Scotland report in relation to the vacancy rate was at a snapshot in time, at a time when the programme was reporting an annual vacancy rate. So we would set out where we'd wanted to get to in terms of recruitment plan over the course of a year. We've changed the way that we report against our recruitment and how we look at how we profile our staff, so that we're looking at bringing in the staff at the right time to do the jobs that are needed at that point in time. So, for example, we wouldn't take somebody in April to do work that wasn't needed until November. So on that basis, we now report on a month-by-month recruitment targets against a profile that we have over the course of the year on a monthly basis. Within the programme, we recognise the recruitment challenges that Audit Scotland have set out, and I think, as Andy and others have said, it's not unique to the Scottish Government, affects the wider public sector, but we are taking a number of measures to try and make sure we've got the right people with the right skills in post to deliver the benefits that we're taking forward. So, for example, we're putting in place at the moment quite a lot of work to train and recruit our own skills within the programme. So user-centred design is a key role that we need. So that's about how we take forward user research. It's about how we do business analysis in a kind of digital environment. So in that space, we're training our own staff to do that so that we can leave a legacy for the Scottish Government in this space, and we're not relying on external recruitment all of the time. We also take a resource pool approach. So the Workforce Planning Group looks at how we allocate some of those specialist skills across the whole programme, so they're not just aligned to one particular project, so that we can flex and change the resource to meet delivery priorities as they arise. We try and retain and redeploy resources within the programme. Again, the Workforce Planning Group's taking a strategic view about when people roll off one project, where do they go on to then, and how do we move those skills around the programme. And I think, key in this space is the way that we work with contractors. So some of our key delivery posts where we maybe wouldn't get the necessary skills we might need in the Scottish Government, we have key contractors who are there upskilling Scottish Government staff and passing on that wide expertise from the wider public and private sector within the Scottish Government.
Okay, thank you. Bill Bowman.
Thank you, Convener. Just going back to the discussion about governance and structure, once when we had Paul Gray in here talking about NHS matters, I asked him and he confirmed that in terms of the NHS, the buck stopped with him. Are you Paul Gray in terms of social security?
I am Paul Gray in terms of social security, yes. But not retired, yes.
Okay, good to know, thank you. You said that you agreed the recommendations, I think, in the Auditor General's report. And I was going to assume that you agreed the messages, but can I just confirm that? Because I think Stephen Kerr said you maybe had a disagreement with Audit Scotland.
I took a different view in the particular example they cited in terms of how the governance worked, but I agreed with the general point about the need to make decisions as quickly as possible in the programme.
So in terms of the key messages in the report?
What has been incredibly useful for me coming into post has been to have a very high quality report from Audit Scotland like this. The key messages that Audit Scotland are picking up are exactly the ones which I am finding the programme and the agency are already seeing. So I would say that there's a strong alignment between the work of the programme and the agency, and the Audit Scotland report, which as an accountable officer I'm finding reassuring at this point.
So if we can look at key message 4, which said the Scottish Government does not yet have a clear understanding of the key things needed to deliver all the remaining benefits in a way it intends. This includes not monitoring and reporting on how much it will cost to fully implement all the benefits. How could that happen, and have you actually fixed that?
Yes, I mean, I think that was what Audit Scotland were reflecting at the time when they were doing the investigative work.
This is May, I think we got this.
This was May, and I think the work was undertaken earlier in the year. Since February, the programme has made a significant investment in workforce planning, in planning and governance, and in financial reviews, and all of those are feeding into the refresh of the programme business case, and that will set out all of the work that is required for Wave 2, how that will be financed, how that will be resourced, how the governance will work around about that, and that's work that needed to happen in the last 6 months, and I'm assured with the quality of the processes that I'm seeing and the pace around that and the focus around that, that will conclude shortly, and we'll be able to discuss that with ministers.
So it is what it is, you might say. But are you saying then that you will have this clear understanding in the next 6 months, and Audit Scotland would not make that comment again?
I'm very optimistic that when Audit Scotland come back, and I think they come back to the programme again in a month's time, that they will see significant progress in these areas.
Doesn't sound like a yes, exactly.
Well, the agile process that we're following means that we are able to flex and iterate depending on the circumstances and the events that that the programme encounters. So it's meant, for example, that we've been able to do work to bring Scottish child payment into the programme and to adjust other planned activity in order to enable that to happen. That then requires all of these different elements, the workforce planning, the planning of the activities and the planning of the finances, and indeed the governance, to be adjusted and made robust for that particular programme of work. And that is exactly what is coming together in the refresh of the programme business case.
Sorry.
You got further questions, Mr. Bowman?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. If you could make them quite brief, that would be helpful. Thank you.
The programme plan you're speaking about that we're going to see, this runs for the next, 5 years, 6 years?
It runs for the rest of the programme, so through to the end of 2025, yes.
And how much detail does that go in terms of planning for people's actual work? I mean, do you know what you're going to be doing on the 5th of September 2023 or something?
It won't work exactly like that, because we will still need to keep learning and iterating as this work rolls forward. But it will set out the critical path of activities so that we understand all the interdependencies, not just within the programme that you see represented around the table here, but also, for example, in our relationships with DWP. So we understand where significant risks sit and the plans that we have in place to mitigate those, and indeed that we have choices and options about ways in which those risks can be managed as the programme of work unfolds. Stephen?
It's an actual part of the programme that has to work in this agile way. So if you'd asked 2 years ago, would we know what we'd be doing by today's date, we couldn't have imagined the Scottish child payment, for example. Therefore, we need to work in a programme that has the room and the flexibility to bring components in and move components out in terms of what we're delivering. We absolutely have an understanding of what we need to deliver by 2021, 2022, and so on and so forth. And how those plans develop over time will depend on whether there's any further ministerial commitments made and the delivery schedules that we're working on for the benefits as well.
Would you have known where you would have been if you hadn't had that extra payment to make?
Yes, because we had a plan in place to deliver benefits to a certain timetable. That plan has been adjusted to accommodate the Scottish child payment.
I just finally to ask Alison Byrne, you remarked on what Audit Scotland has said about, I think, staff numbers, and you said, oh, we're changing the way we're measuring that. Is that just a way of, trying to dodge what Audit Scotland found? You're changing the methodology?
No, absolutely not. It's actually a more nuanced and granular way of understanding how we bring together our resource plans, our delivery plans and our finance plans to understand what workforce we need at a particular point in time to deliver. So, for example, if suppliers come on site a bit later than had been originally planned, then obviously we don't need the staff there on the ground to stand up to interface with them and work with them at that point in time. So it's a much more nuanced understanding of what are the staff we need at a given point in the programme with the work we have underway at that point in time to deliver, rather than looking at an annual target that just lumps in all of the work for a year and doesn't tell you at any point in time what staff you need on the ground to be able to deliver according to the delivery plans you have at that point in time too. So no, it's actually about getting a much more granular understanding of the alignment between our resource, our finance and our delivery plans.
Willie Coffey.
Thanks, Jenny. Just a brief follow-up to an issue that was raised earlier on the digital staff footprint. I think, Andy, you said it's roughly 50-50 between permanent staff and contract staff, I think.
The 8.
Right, oh, that's good. It's quite a high component, of course, and it's not unusual to have such a high component of contractual staff who tend to not stay particularly long in projects, usually 6 months or so. My question simply is to look for an assurance from you that the code they leave behind for others is well documented so that others can pick up the software that they've left behind so that we can add it and adapt it and repurpose it if required.
Yes, short answer is yes. Everything that we do, everything that we code and we document is centrally stored in a range of tools that we have. We go through a process of continual learning and knowledge and skills transfer from our interim contractors to our permanent staff. The pace at which we are producing technology and producing artifacts, designs, drawings and code, etc., is a rich asset of information. Some of the digital assets we're actually producing, we're now looking to share in the wider public sector.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do members have any further points for our witnesses? Can I thank you all very much indeed for your evidence this morning, and I now briefly suspend for a changeover of witnesses. Item 3 is Section 23 report on Scottish Public Pensions Agency, an update on management of PS Pensions Project. Can I welcome our witnesses to the meeting this morning? Caroline Gardner, Auditor General for Scotland, Stephen Boyle, Audit Director, and Tom Reid, Senior Audit Manager, all from Audit Scotland. Auditor General, you'd like to make an opening statement.
Convener, very briefly, the purpose of this report is to set out the problems experienced by the Scottish Public Pensions Agency in implementing a major new IT system and the financial implications of those problems. The agency's principal role is to administer and pay pensions for members, deferred members and pensioners of the NHS, teachers, police and firefighters pension schemes in Scotland. In October 2015, the agency awarded a £5.6 million contract to Capita Employee Solutions to deliver a unified pensions administration and payment system. The new system, PS Pensions, was to be operational by March 2017. In February 2018, the agency's new chief executive decided to close the project. The agency spent £6.3 million on the project and has written off £1.6 million in capitalised assets that will no longer be used. The closure of the project means the agency has not been able to progress its strategic business and workforce plans as originally intended. As a result, it expects to need additional revenue budget of £9.8 million between 2019-20 and 2022-23. It also needs capital allocations of £13.6 million over the next 5 years. The agency has extended contracts with its existing suppliers to ensure that payment of pensions is not affected by the closure of the project. In October last year, I published a Section 22 report on the matter, but at that time I was unable to report on the reasons for the project's failure due to an ongoing legal process between the agency and Capita. I've prepared this report following the conclusion of the legal process. The settlement included a payment of £700,000 from Capita to the agency. Responsibility for the failure of the project was shared between Capita and the agency. Capita failed to meet any of the agreed milestones for the project and was unable to provide a working system. Changes in the leadership of the SPPA and in the management of the project made it more difficult for the agency to manage the supplier effectively and properly hold it to account. This was compounded by inadequate governance and project assurance arrangements. In my report, I've concluded that the SPPA failed to achieve value for money in this project. The team and I will do our best to answer your questions, Convener.
Thank you very much, Auditor General. Colin Beattie.
Auditor General, I guess one of the key things that jumps out here is something you touched on about governance. The impact on the project of the turnover of key members of staff seems to have been fairly significant. You've said in the report that the lack of continuity in these roles made it difficult for proper scrutiny and indeed challenge to Capita. What was the reason for this heavy turnover? Were they pushed, or were they? What's the reason?
You're right that there were significant changes both in the chief executive role and the senior responsible officer for the project, and we've aimed to summarise that in Exhibit 1 on page 10 of the report. There isn't a single reason for it. There were a number of things going on, and I'll ask Stephen, with Tom's help, to take you through that.
Thank you. Good morning. Exhibit 1 outlines, I think, the volume of changes, as you suggest, Mr. Beattie, in the project, both in the accountable officer chief executive position and that of the senior responsible officer for leading the project. This is much more than we would typically see over the life of a project. And absolutely, we think that was a key contributory factor to the lack of success of the project. There were a number of reasons. We are not aware that any individuals were pushed out of the organisation as a consequence of the unsuccessful nature of the project. And there are a range of factors, both of some secondments to the Scottish Government that we capture in the exhibit, some retirements, and also people just changing jobs. So there's no one reason, and just to repeat that point, we're not aware that anybody was asked to move on from any position that they held during the course of the project.
This is a key project for SPPA. Surely someone would have noticed that there was instability in terms of the governance of the project due to the extraordinary turnover. Somebody would have noticed. Did anybody query it?
So I think you're right. People would have noticed. People who worked in the agency and the Management Advisory Board would all have been aware that there were changes in both the leadership of the project and of the agency. We're not cited on whether there were any conversations that took place that sought to intervene or address these changes in leadership.
Another thing, of course, is that the project board seemed to have been kept a little bit in the dark from what you're saying. According to your report, they specifically asked for budget and cost information and better reporting on the progress of the project. Is there any reason why they didn't get that? I mean, this seems like a bit of déjà vu from other, other projects that we've looked at.
I think you're right. We comment on paragraph 22 of the report about the circumstances you outline about the lack of information being provided to the project board, and that this was raised by members of the project board as the project developed. We also make a wider point about governance, about the role of the Management Advisory Board, who are there to support the accountable officer in their decision making. That they too weren't provided with enough information at the key early stages of the project to support its implementation and through the delivery phase.
Do about it when they didn't get that information?
Pardon, I didn't.
What did they do about it when they didn't get that information?
So we know that the governance arrangements were changed during the course of the project. We saw that the SPPA sought to bring in extraordinary audit and risk committee meetings and extraordinary management advisory boards to consider how well the project was being implemented towards the beginning of 2017. In our view, that happened too late. That there needed to be stronger governance at a much earlier stage, right at this infancy of the project.
That still brings me back to the original question which I asked is, why were these requests not met? Was there any reason given?
I think we are not cited on the reason why. I think that would be a question that the SPPA would be better placed to answer.
Now, we've raised the question of governance in previous instances as a result of reports from the Auditor General, and time and again we come across this aspect of governance where information is not being passed on to the people that are responsible for governance, the board or whatever. And here we have it again. But what did the individual members do? Did they make a noise about it? They were obviously unhappy at not getting correct information. I mean, this is basic stuff. Budget and cost information, report on the progress of the project. It's very basic. They couldn't possibly do their job without that basic information. What did they do about it?
We agree, Mr. Beattie. We think this is basic information that was missing from the project.
Can I take it that they did nothing?
So, it may, as I suggested, it may be a case to explore more closely with the SPPA. We understand from the conversations that we had with board members that there were attempts by them to ask for more information, and that belatedly happened, I think, probably with the creation and the more substantial governance around the project from the beginning of 2017. But it's quite a long time lapse, and I think there ought to have been stronger representations to insist upon more information being provided, essentially so that non-executives on the Management Advisory Board could better fulfil their responsibilities of supporting the accountable officer.
It would appear that the efforts to get more information were pretty feeble. Who would have been responsible for providing the information to the project board? They were asking people. Who were they asking?
Ultimately, the responsibility rests with the senior responsible officer for the project, who would be tasked with supporting the project board in their consideration. and ultimately the senior management team through to supporting both the accountable officer and the management advisory board in discharging its responsibilities of advising the accountable officer.
The senior management team did not respond to requests by the project board for this basic information.
Certainly that's our understanding, although as I suggest we did see improvements as the project evolved.
I think it's worth adding to what Stephen said, Mr. Beattie, that one of the issues here, as we've seen in other instances, is a confusion of roles. The chief exec of the agency is the accountable officer. The chief exec is also a member of the management advisory board, because it's an agency, it's a management advisory board, not a standard board, and that individual also chaired the programme board. So that confusion of roles, I think, makes it harder to hold to account those who should be providing the information. And we've seen something similar in other cases where the chief exec has been very involved in the hands-on detail of the programme that makes it much harder to spot and react when problems start to emerge. I think that's some of the context for what Stephen's described to you.
I mean, as at this moment, as a result of your report and everything that's come out about this, is there now a proper structure in place?
We think lessons are being learned. We talked towards the end of the report about the actions that the new chief executive has taken since she took up post, including closing the old project, but also carrying out a lesson learned review, which used our publication, Principles for a Digital Future, to look at what was missing last time that needs to be in place. They're also planning to take a more incremental approach to the replacement, which still needs to happen, than was intended this time. And I think it's too early for us to give you assurance that all of those lessons have been learned and put into practice.
And ask Sarwar.
Good morning. I want to focus on the Scottish Government's interaction and role in all of this. At the start, who would be the responsible individual within the Scottish Government in terms of oversight for the project?
There is a sponsor department within the Scottish Government, and the team will confirm for you who that is. There is then a less direct accountability relationship, but a role of support and challenge coming from the Digital Directorate and Internal Audit that you will see coming through the report. So I'll ask Stephen just to confirm who the sponsor relationship is with to make sure we keep that straight.
Sure. So the Scottish Government sponsor is Gordon Wales, the Chief Finance Officer. It has changed since the conception of the project. A number of times, and previously been the DG Finance, Alison Stafford, at one stage, and I think one of her colleagues also had that role at various points during the project.
So the report's clearly flagged up failures of the SPPA. What failures do you think identifies in terms of the Scottish Government's interaction with the SPPA and overseeing the project?
We set out in the report a number of interactions between the SPPA and government at various stages throughout it, and there are some instances where concerns were raised by government, including right at the beginning around procurement, that then weren't acted on by the agency. In response to your direct question, though, there is a point at which the Office of the Chief Information Officer carried out a review which gave assurance about the procurement and the contract that had been put in place, and we haven't seen evidence to support that assessment. Our view is that there were problems that weren't properly recognised at that stage.
And one example is of the interaction is when the SPPA says to the Scottish Government's legal department that they don't have the skills required to negotiate. Once the and you rightly highlight in the report that the SPPA didn't take the necessary steps to find those skills to make it happen. But surely there's a point where the Scottish Government says the SPPA has come to us, they don't have the skills. What further support are we going to either impose or at least direct the SPPA towards to make that happen? Why didn't the Scottish Government do that?
You're right, we refer to those events in paragraph 15 of the report. In that instance, I think the responsibility lies with the SPPA. They were given a very clear steer that this fell into the category of an abnormally low tender. That raised questions about whether the supplier would be able to deliver, and they were advised that additional inquiries should take place. SPPA said they didn't have the resources to do it and took no further action, and I think responsibility for that sits with the agency.
I accept that, but is there a lesson to be learned in future in terms, not just for this agency, but for future agencies, that if an agency, which is an arm of the public sector, recognises it doesn't have the skills or looks like it's failing to take appropriate action when it's told to take appropriate action, surely there is a role for the Scottish Government to step in at that point, or at least give greater interaction at that point to minimise the risk of a mistake taking place?
I think there is that wider lesson. Since those events took place, we have seen changes in the way the government aims to provide challenge and support to public bodies that are undertaking big IT systems. We've also talked in this committee a lot, though, about the need to prioritise that and make sure that it's in the right places. I think that's one of those difficult decisions about how the people responsible recognise those warning signs and respond to them with the scale of digital development that's going on. And you got a sense of that in the earlier session this morning with the scale of the social security programme and the attention we know that is taking up in a field of limited people and limited skills.
You mentioned the review. I'll just quote one sentence from it. Careful attention needs to be paid to the procurement process, which faces a number of challenges around requirement, definition, resources and timeline. So that was a review undertaken by a Scottish Government officer into the SPPA activity, is that right?
Can you give me the paragraph number you're referring to, Mr.
So paragraph
Sarwar?
17, I believe.
Yes, that came from the Scottish Government's Programme and Project Management Centre of Expertise.
So when the Scottish Government did that review and made that observation, the SPPA didn't act upon that?
That wasn't a review specifically of SPPA. That was what you're referring to is the traffic light rating system, right, which was used at that time by the Centre of Expertise. The review gave an overall rating of amber green, which is the second bullet point down on that list.
And what lesson will the Scottish Government and more generally learn from that particular paragraph and other things around what we do in future around agencies?
I think it is fair to say that things have moved on significantly since 2014 and 15 when these things were happening. We reported to the committee before the summer recess on progress with enabling digital government and reported on some of the improvements that have been made, but also some of the risks that remain. I think the biggest risk is exactly the one you're trying to probe. Given the range of digital programmes that are underway, the scale of the investment, it's really important both that it's clear how government prioritises which programmes it wants to get involved in and that it's got a good risk monitoring system to spot the early warning signs and respond to them.
On one final question, Convener, is given that we have a number of issues around IT projects and we have a number of issues around how different agencies procure support, is there a role for the Scottish Government to set up an expert group that looks at procurement, that looks at IT, that goes in and does that for agencies rather than leaving it to the agencies themselves to go and make these negotiations and put these teams together?
That's very much one of the issues that we were exploring in the report that I've just referred to. I think the committee is planning to take evidence on that in due course, and it would be a question to explore with government. There's clearly a real challenge for how government makes sure that it's got the right skills and expertise in place for IT, given the scarcity of those skills across the country and the cost of them, and then how it makes sure that it's got a clear line of sight of when they're needed so that that sort of rolling on and learning from one project to another can happen well. How it does that, I think, is a matter for government, but we've clearly identified the need for government to have a much clearer sight of what's needed, where and when, so that it can make sure those skills are in place.
Thank you.
Brief supplementary on a point raised there, Liam Kerr.
Yeah, very briefly, if I may, Auditor General. I may just be completely missing something here, but how does it work in terms of the finances? Did the SPPA have 5.6 million sitting in the bank that they could use to spend on this, or was it incumbent upon them to go to the Scottish Government and say, look, we've procured the system, this is how it's going to work, we need 5.6 million signed off and in our bank account at some point in the near future, i.e. who's made the actual decision to go ahead?
I'm going to bring Stephen in a moment, but one of the key findings of this report, as in others, was that the SPPA did not have a clear business case that set out what it wanted to achieve, the scope and what it was likely to cost. So it certainly isn't the case that it knew it needed 5.6 million and went and asked for that funding. Stephen, can you flesh that out?
Yeah, just the SPPA, like other agencies, participates in the annual budget setting process, so it will submit, broadly speaking, budget bids that will be considered amongst other priorities and then subject to approval by the Parliament before the start of the financial year through the Budget Act. the total £5.6 million was phased over the lifetime of the project. So whilst it would have been aware, government would have been aware of in the totality of what the sum that would be requested or anticipated that was needed, that wouldn't be factored in in totality for a transfer of cash to the SPPA.
The SPPA have said, on your report, they have come forward with an inadequate set of propositions, and someone in the Scottish Government has looked at that and said, yeah, clear to go, green light, and perhaps should not have done so based on the conclusions that you've drawn. Is that a fair conclusion that I'm drawing?
I think we would say, suggested throughout the project that it wasn't sufficiently joined up between the agency and government, not just on finance, but also more generally about the assurance reviews that the agency were supported with government, and also the procurement advice that they received. So, as the Auditor General suggests, we think matters are improving, but at the time of this project, that wasn't sufficiently well coordinated or challenged.
Willie Coffey.
Thanks very much, Convener. Good morning to everyone. We've had reports like this before, and at the heart of them, some of these software projects, to me, it seems we don't have a clear understanding of what the requirements actually were to be. I think this is a perfect example of this, and I wonder, Auditor General, if you can tell us a wee bit about that. It seems to me that there was no clear specification of what the requirements were supposed to be. Convener, in the past I've used the analogy of building a piece of software is the same as, in principle, as building a house. You have to specify what you want. You don't just ask a builder to build your house and take what the builder gives you. You specify what you want, and it's the same with software. And Caroline, you said ultimately Capita were unable to provide a working system. Now, what's the reason for that? Did we not get clear specification of what the requirements were to be, or was there just a complete lack of skills in the mix to deliver what was supposed to be done?
I think to start with, you're absolutely right about the foundations. In this case, as in others I've reported on, those foundations weren't there. I say in the report in paragraphs 7 to 9 that there was no clear business case setting out what it was that SPP wanted to achieve, the scope of it, the likely costs, the governance arrangements and so on. There was a paper for the senior management team in September 2014 which outlined 3 options, from the option they went for, the highest risk one about a fully integrated bespoke system, through to separate solutions for pensions administration and member services, through to separate systems for all of the things they wanted to do. That paper set out the advantages and disadvantages of each, but didn't go through a proper options appraisal, which we would expect to see, and I imagine you would as well. And that paper wasn't presented to the Management Advisory Board for consideration. So my sense is, like yours, that people were making decisions without fully understanding what they were signing up for and what the risks involved were. As we said at the beginning of this morning's session, there were significant changes at both the Chief Executive level and at the Senior Responsible Officer level, which made it harder to keep that oversight and challenge of what was going on. When alarm bells were sounded, for example, around the procurement process and the abnormally low bid from Capita, those warning signs weren't acted on, and that carried on all the way through. My view is there's something important in the response we gave to Mr. Beattie's question, that the Chief Executive at that point was on the Management Advisory Board, on the Senior Management Team and on the Programme Board, so that there isn't that sort of degree of distance and separation that you might expect to be able to challenge it. And it wasn't until the new Chief Executive came along and was able to stand back and look at the progress or lack of it at that point that decisive action was taken. I can't comment on the reasons for Capita's inability to deliver on what they promised beyond what we know about the abnormally low tender, but I think the fact that the settlement that was reached for them with them after the legal process included a payment of £700,000 from Capita to the agency tells you there was some admission of liability in there.
Yeah, I mean, your timeline on page 16, the appendix there about the timeline of events, it seems to show that the whole thing started in December 13, and then when the software started to throw up these errors, it was June 16. I mean, that's 3 years into the project before they start discovering this user acceptance testings, identifying this high level of errors. I mean, that's quite a long time in the development of the project to begin to begin to discover errors, and it was due to be delivered the following March. I mean, that's a ridiculously late time in the project life cycle to only start to discover that there's errors with the delivery of the software. Am I reading that correctly?
You're reading it slightly wrong, I think.
Right.
You're right that it did start in 2013. Work didn't start on the project until December 2015. You'll see the box there just above the line. And it was very quickly after that that problems started to emerge. The reason for that long gap between sort of starting the recognition of the need for the project and work starting was that SPPA didn't have the people it needed to do the procurement well. So there were delays in there, which we outline in the report. Those delays didn't lead to a rethinking of the timeline for the project as a whole because of the expiry of their current contracts with their current providers, which meant they did have a ridiculously short period of time to try to deliver the whole thing. I think it was 18 months that they were planning to go from agreeing the contract to having the project up and working, which, as we say in the report, was never going to be realistic. So it was the front end problems that led to the back end failure of user acceptance testing.
Common message at this committee before, that if you don't get it right at the front end and the preparation and planning isn't done correctly, you pay the price at the tail end of a project. But Auditor General, the principles for a digital future have been pretty well established for a wee while now. You're saying that they didn't really embrace, or did they know about these principles for a digital future? They seem to have the Prince 2 development methodology in place here, but they didn't apply it. From what I read in your report, they didn't seem to apply that. So is there a sense there that they just are unaware of the whole approach to delivering digital solutions?
Certainly, when they started the process, that was before we had pulled together our document on principles for a digital future. But you're right, that document wasn't original work. It was putting together good practice that already existed. In my view, they didn't recognise the scale of what they were trying to do and the risks involved, and they didn't have the skills to manage it. But I think Stephen can tell you more about that.
Yes, that's right. It's certainly one of the conclusions that internal audit, when they reviewed and reported on progress of the project in September 17, was that good project management methodology, Prince 2, whilst there was an awareness of it, wasn't followed effectively. And I think, as the Auditor General mentions, that the Principles for a Digital Future document, which also came out in 2017, effectively by that stage, the project had got to a point, and the seeds had been sown many years before in the timeline that contributed to why it was unsuccessful. One of your earlier points, Mr. Coffey, in terms of, we also make in the project the absence of an effective business case, setting out what the agency hoped to achieve from the project right at its infancy, and there not being a clear, detailed scope or methodology as to what they expected the contractor to deliver. I think all of these were key contributors to why, along with Capita's, the unsuccessful nature of their attempts to meet project milestones contributed to why the project failed.
Okay, thank you.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you. Good morning. Colin Beattie's questions at the outset I thought were good ones, and I'd like to take that back right to the start. Because right at the start of your report, at paragraph 8, you talk about there being no clear business case for the new system. But there was an options paper that was prepared and presented to the senior management team. Now, that options paper had no costs, benefits, or financial information. Do you know why?
I'll ask the team to answer the why question. I think it's also worth noting that the options paper was later than we think it should have been. Some key decisions have been taken already by then. Steve and Tom, who wants to pick up what was going on there?
So I don't think we're entirely clear, Mr. Kerr, as to why there weren't detailed cost-benefit analysis set out in the options paper. As we say in the paper, the fact that these decisions and governance decisions taken weren't made with the availability of complete detailed analysis and scrutiny right at the start of the project were key factors in why the project ultimately didn't succeed.
Didn't anyone on the SMT, on the senior management team, who are no doubt paid a decent amount of money and have qualifications to be on the SMT, did none of them at any point, or is there any evidence that any of them at any point turned around and said, look, we've got this options paper, it has no financial information, it has no costs, it has no benefits, shouldn't we be getting some more information here?
We don't think they did. We do know, as we say in paragraph 9, that that paper wasn't taken to the Management Advisory Board, and we think it should have been. They should have had the chance to scrutinise it as well for exactly that reason, that if the senior management team aren't asking those questions, somebody a bit further removed should be.
Well, that's exactly the point. Do you have any evidence of why it never went up to the Management Advisory Board?
We don't understand the rationale for it. That's why we've reported in the terms that we have, I think.
I'll finish by asking you to speculate, if I may. Had that paper, had that process happened, had the SMT referred that up to the Management Advisory Board, is it possible that the way this had played out could have been different, do you think?
Speculation is always dangerous. I would say that one of the reasons why people don't make that sort of referral upwards is because they don't themselves understand the risks that they're managing here, and my hunch is that that's what's happening in this case. I think one of the particular features of executive agencies is that the Management Advisory Board doesn't have the same status and clout as the board of a non-departmental public body or a health board would, for example, and it's harder for them to be able to insist on getting the sort of information that they require. Again, going back to Mr. Beattie's question, and in relation to Mr. Beattie, I said that one of the challenges was that the Chief Executive is the accountable officer, a member of the Management Advisory Board, and chaired the project board. And I think that blurring of roles doesn't help at all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Just to follow on from that, Auditor General, excuse me, paragraph 22 says the project board was chaired by the Chief Executive. And then it goes on to say there was a lack of financial information. We note that members of the project board requested more budget and cost information. Now, if the Chief Executive was chairing that meeting, why wasn't the Chief Executive able to provide that information to the board members?
I suspect the fact that the wording is clear that its members wanted clearer reporting rather than the Chief Executive, the accountable officer, insisting on it, goes back to the point we've just been discussing about the blurring of roles. Stephen Tom may be able to add to that for you, but I think that blurring is key to this.
I think that's exactly right, that that point, plus also the change in leadership as well, that the Chief Executive, in chairing both the project board and also the Management Advisory Board, had that awareness, whether that awareness and understanding of the progress of the project and its costs was shared across either the project board or the Management Advisory Board, we think was a key factor in that there was insufficient scrutiny or understanding of either the initiation of the project or how well it was progressing over its life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, this is maybe something we may decide to take up, but Auditor General, it just strikes me that, we released our thematic report last week that highlighted themes that just keep coming up in reports again and again: IT issues, leadership, governance. In a way, this is a classic report from you because it highlights all of these problems.
It's a very good example of, at the very least, the concerns that we and you have raised a number of times about major IT projects and about why good governance matters and what happens when that's not in place.
Mm-hmm. Members have any further points? Bill Bowman?
Thank you. I agree with all the questions. I think this is almost a case study of how things go wrong and people know about it, but it doesn't work through. Unless I missed it somewhere, was there an audit committee?
Yes, the Audit and Risk Committee is part of the governance structure of the SPPA, yes.
What were they doing?
So I think, similarly, some of the earlier answers, the consideration and oversight of the Audit and Risk Committee strengthened during the life of the project, particularly as they brought in extraordinary meetings for both the Audit and Risk Committee and the Management Advisory Board So whilst there was awareness of it, we think it could have happened at an earlier stage for the role of the Audit Committee to support the accountable officer.
So do you think the Audit Committee's knowledge or involvement actually mitigated anything or not?
We make a point in the report, Mr. Bowman, about the role of internal audit, and that internal audit offered or made suggestions about what role it could help the Audit and Risk Committee and the agency more generally in terms of the progress of the project, but that wasn't taken up by management or pushed through by the Audit and Risk Committee. And that offer made in 2016, then only the reporting happened much later in 2017. And you can see some of the findings from internal audit are really quite significant about the unsuccessful nature of the project.
I know you don't like to speculate, and I know you don't like to name names, but from your knowledge of the Audit Committee, should they have had the skills or the competences to make more of this?
The Audit and Risk Committee membership has changed over time, absolutely, but there are experienced accountants and auditors who had been members of that Audit and Risk Committee in membership capacity. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily a skills deficiency on the Audit and Risk Committee, perhaps more about the information and indeed that sense of how they discharge their role in a different way perhaps from what you see in a non-departmental public body or health board compared to the executive agency model that they were in.
Okay.
Liam Kerr.
Very briefly, thank you, Convener. Something this committee's been concerned about through many of the reports we looked at. This report identifies various failings by various individuals, particularly senior individuals who are no longer at the agency and presumably gone elsewhere to progress their careers. If I were to ask a general question and not seeking specifics at this stage about whether you know where those individuals have gone in their career, would you be able to answer me?
I think I can go a bit further than that, and again I'll refer you back to Exhibit 1, Mr. Kerr, if I may. You'll see that the key period that we're talking about here, a long-standing chief executive left, I think through retirement in April 2015. There was then a chief executive appointed in July 2015 who left in March 2017 with a secondment to the Scottish Government in between during a key part of the process. That chief executive resigned and there was no settlement involved in that. And then after an interim chief executive, a new permanent chief executive was appointed in July 2017, and it was that new chief executive who decided to close the project based on the concerns that were apparent at that stage.
Thank you.
Colin Beattie.
Just one point that I picked up. The Office of the Chief Information Commissioner concluded that the procurement process of the project was conducted in a quote, a robust and professional manner consistent with due process. Do you know if that office was aware of the advice provided by the Scottish Government's legal department that more in-depth questioning of Capita's bid was required and that the bid was accepted without this advice being actioned?
I don't think we do know whether that's the case, but I do say in paragraph 28 that we haven't seen evidence to support that conclusion from the Office of the Chief Information Officer.
And I guess, still looking at the Office of the Chief Information, do you know if that office was aware that the Scottish Government Programme and Project Management Centre of Expertise had also highlighted that careful attention needs to be paid to the procurement process, which faces a number of challenges around requirement definition, resources and timeline?
As I say, I'm not sure if we can answer the specifics about what they were aware of. All I can repeat is that we say in the report we haven't seen evidence to support their conclusion. Stephen, is there anything you want to add to that? There may well be.
No, certainly I think that's why we are querying at paragraph 28 the conclusion that it was a robust process, especially with the evidence that we saw about that exchange between the agency and the Scottish Government legal department calls into question the conclusion that that was reached about the quality of the procurement process.
Is it Audit Scotland's opinion that the procurement process was not robust?
I think we certainly, as we touched on a couple of points in the report, that an abnormally low bid was accepted and then wasn't subject to a full scrutiny and challenge, suggests that there were deficiencies in the procurement process.
Okay.
Auditor General, there's been a lot of figures on capital allocations written off and additional revenue required. Is it possible to provide an overall cost to the public on what this has cost?
It's not straightforward to do that, I'm afraid, Convener, which is why we haven't done it in the report. That's mainly because the most significant cost, as we've seen elsewhere, is the opportunity cost. The SPPA intended to use this programme to change the way it operates and to generate future savings, as well as improvements in the services that it provides to pension scheme members, and those benefits have been lost. We've set out what the costs were, what's been written off, what's been recovered. We know there will be future requirements to achieve those benefits, but it's not possible, I think, to put a single figure on what's been lost.
That's a pity. Okay. Thank you very much indeed for your evidence this morning. I now close the public part of this meeting as we move into private session. Thank you.